Hello, everyone. This is Mary Kurek with Frontrunners Innovate. And on this edition, we have two very special guests, and one who's familiar to you because he's co-hosted with me before. And this is Ambassador Richard Swett. And I'm going to let him do more of the introduction, but just to say that he is the founder, I guess co-founder would be correct. I'm not sure, Dick, but
Right.
yeah, co-founder of Climate Prosperity Enterprise Solutions, focused on economic development, smart city development using tech, and also a hybrid version. Those are my words, a hybrid version of how to put together these enterprise solutions that get us to, better income and livelihoods for people in these areas that need them. So I'll let him explain a little bit better. But our guest of honor today, the one that we're interviewing, is the Honorable Ambassador Ameenah Gurib-Fakim. And Ameenah is the ambassador for SIDS, for the SIDS program on the World Diplomatic Academy right now, but she has an interesting past, one that includes science, entrepreneurship, and a presidency for the Republic of Mauritius. So we welcome you, Honorable Gurib-Fakim. So we appreciate that you being with us and look forward to learning more about you. But I'm going to kind of give the mic to Ambassador Swett right now, and so ask you, Ambassador Swett, to introduce yourself a little better than what I did.
Okay. Well, we'll take the fast forward version. And, start out. I was originally trained as an architect. I developed alternative energy, clean power energy plants back in the 1980s. That politicized me. I realized that the oil and gas industry was totally dominating the U.S. oil and gas market to the detriment of the climate and to many of the people that utilize the resources. And so I, in anger, ran for Congress, although I had never run for public office before. Everybody told me I didn't have a snowball's chance and you know where to get elected. And to everybody's surprise, probably most honestly, mine too, I was elected and I got to serve several terms in the Congress, where I worked on energy issues, on infrastructure issues, on the built environment issues, because those were the things that I knew best and could address most effectively. And after that, I served as ambassador to the wonderful country of Denmark. In between Congress and Denmark, I ran for the US Senate and was announced the victor by the four major news networks and woke up the vanquished, if you will. So I've had good and bad experiences with politics. But after Denmark, I came back and ran one of the largest architecture and engineering firms in the country, and then set out on my own when the first economic downturn hit in 2007. Looking for ways to build new communities, new markets in emerging economies with a partner of mine who helped me get into the political business way back when, Michael Rowan, because he had helped do this for the Alaskan tribes in the state of Alaska, where they were fighting for and trying to get back the land that they felt had been taken away from them. He convinced them, along with others, to fight together for getting a piece of the pie, but not the whole thing. And they, in that instance, then decided to set up tribal corporations, which built that new marketplace. And that new marketplace enabled 212 tribes in Alaska to flourish. And over the last 40 years, they've had a corporate increase in those corporations of over $155 billion. And so they moved this community of indigenous people from hunter-gatherers, from below poverty line, to middle and upper middle class neighborhoods without a diminution of their traditions and religious traditions and other cultural aspects that were so and still are so important to those communities. So Michael and I looked at this and we said, well, this should be done all throughout the lower 48 states in the United States. When we found out that nobody wants to integrate, everybody wants to have their own little piece of the pie, and that they can protect it that way, we said, well, we're going to go someplace where they can use this, and maybe we'll be more amenable and more able to adopt our integrated approach. We also put it into a platform we call the Prosperity Platform, so we can build these communities, these new markets, and look at the architecture, the engineering, and the economics all in one software, animated software package. And so that's what we went to Africa with. We spent the last 12 years there building relationships, because as you know, on that continent in particular, but everywhere in the world, business is based not on contracts, but on relationships. And we're now working in Sudan, South Sudan, Malawi, and Nigeria. And to bring you to the up to the minute the information, I just got back from Nigeria, where I have 3.5 days, 20 meetings with people talking about how we can implement these communities in Nigeria. But our most advanced project right now is in Malawi, where we are just about to start a feasibility study on looking at how to house 10,000 people, but more importantly, create a marketplace of jobs where they can flourish and they can sustain themselves. And that we just got approval from the president, and we're moving forward on funding for that in the very near future. So there you go, all in one breath.
Good job. Good job. Awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay. So we have your background. And so now you have a perspective, you know, on what questions he may ask, where he's coming from, Honorable Ameenah. And so we would like to learn a little bit more about your background. So if you'll give us a little bit of idea of where you started your professional life from that brought you into the leadership roles that you're playing today.
Thank you, Mary. I think already I struck a chord with His Excellency, in as much I also worked on traditional knowledge. So I'll come back to this in a minute.
Okay.
I have grown up in Mauritius, in a very small village, and but I moved from that village onto the world stage through the sheer power of education. Mm-hmm. And I had parents who, of course, were visionary, and they decided that their daughter and their son would have equal opportunities. I'm a Muslim by faith, and yet my father decided to send me to a convent school, Catholic school, and I was taught, educated by Irish nuns who were on a mission in Mauritius. So I went to convent school, and I did my secondary, you know, what you call high school in the US, and then I was poised to go to college. But before this, I must say that I had no idea what science was all about until I had very motivated teachers who taught me the ropes of science, and they taught me the demystified science for me. And the major event, I must say, that brought me to that space was, of course, the Apollo mission, because we were one of the few countries that watched it live, because you had this collaboration at the time with South Africa, and we just got the TV at home. And so we watched it live. I was very young, a young child. So the first moonshot moment for me was precisely Men on the Moon. And the second moonshot moment was when I saw how transformational science can be, when I saw the birth of test tube baby Brown. That was in London, Louise Brown. So I said to myself, well, you know, science is for me. And so these teachers, these nuns, they were able to answer these questions that a very inquisitive child could ask. So I thought that was it. But I came up with my first obstacle for getting into the science, because I was told when I went to see the career guidance officer, of course, on the advice of my father, he said, go in and see what are the career choices when you come back, because I wanted to do chemistry. He looked at me, waif-like girl walking through that door, and he said to me, why do you want to do science? It's for boys, it's not for girls. And when you come back, the short-sightedness of this vision was that when you come back, you will not have a job, because we are very far from the science space at the time. So I came back home and I said to my father, he said to me, what did he say? I said, well, he said to me, science is for boys and I will not get a job when I come back. So he said to me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to follow my heart, and I'm still going to do science. So I went to college, and I graduated with a degree in science. And then lo and behold, I spent 1 year out in industry. And precisely, I went to an American firm at the time, Dow Chemical Company. And I did my industrial training in that particular institution. So I got to learn the ropes of research. So I said to my father, I'm not going to come back home just yet to work. I'm going to do a PhD. So I went ahead and did a PhD. Organic chemistry, chemistry of carbon, chemistry of life itself. And then I had a postdoc to go to the United States. I was all set up to go to Baton Rouge in Louisiana. And I went home, and I got a job at the university, and I stayed there. Just like Edith Piaf said, you know, I regret nothing. So I started again all from scratch, because the infrastructure I was used to in the UK wasn't present in Mauritius. But I said to all the girls and to all the boys who are aspiring to make a career out of science, there will be no red carpet deployed for you. So you have to make it all the way. So I was still looking for that science. I fell into the chemistry of plants, because we are a biodiversity hotspot. And I thought to myself, you know, to add to the body of language, to add to the body of knowledge, you'll have to produce new data and new, of course, new findings. So it was a fantastic opportunity to actually explore this unique biodiversity, identify new molecules, publish, you know, publish or perish, which is the mantra in academia. And then I managed to be lucky at the time, because, you know, chance will smile at you only once, and I seized it, where there was a regional project funded by, at the time, the European Development Fund, which of course is not, the European Union didn't exist at the time. And it was about creating a database on herbal knowledge, study medicinal and aromatic plants. And with my chemistry background, who had already been dabbling into this area, so I led that project. And I created the very first database on herbal knowledge, traditional knowledge, medicinal plants, you name it. So I created the very first database, and I published as well, because I thought to myself, this is a knowledge which has been shared with me by healers. So I think it's in my duty to put it back again, to give it back to the people. So I published that. Then I started saying to myself, it's a bit sterile, just isolating molecule and publishing new molecules. So I thought I'll give some kind of sense to what I was doing. So I decided to add the scientific framework around this traditional knowledge. So how do I do that? I said, when of course I identified all the plants, I knew that many of them were being used to treat rather infectious diseases, because we are living in the tropical space. And the other one where Mauritius has issue with is, of course, is a condition known as diabetes, because we were having improved lifestyle. So I said, I'm going to take all these recipes and shape it, and of course, try to put it into the public, of course, make drug accessible, affordable, of course, socially and culturally accepted and acceptable. So I started doing that, and I was getting fantastic results, and I got in their accolade, became professor, first woman professor in my university, started climbing the academic ladder, eventually became the dean, and finally the deputy president of the university. Then I did not get the post of president, because I happened to be of the wrong gender, maybe the wrong faith. So I didn't get the job. So I said, okay, thank you very much. I left my comfort zone of academia and went into the wild west of entrepreneurship. Why did I go into the world of entrepreneurship? Because I had by that time got the L'Oreal UNESCO Prize for Women in Science. And I was getting a lot of credibility, because that opens doors. And then I met this Frenchman who had already set up a business in Mauritius, a contract research organization. So I said, I will add that other pillar to the holding company, because by bringing in these innovative molecules, by bringing in these innovative compounds, which of course help the development further downstream. So I left my comfort zone of academia and went in there, and I was very happy minding my own business, traveling, of course, getting many contracts. We're a contract research organization, so I have to earn my living. And I remember very well, I had given this TED talk in Rio de Janeiro. I came back home, and there were this journalist who called me. She says to me, ma'am, you know, your name has been cited for president in the forthcoming election. I said, you must be joking, because I have no political ambition whatsoever. So why are you citing me? She says to me, well, can you say it in a statement? Of course, I said it in a statement. And what happens the next day? Front page of the newspaper, my picture, Ameenah Gurib-Fakim for president, small interrogation mark. People don't see the interrogation mark. They just see my name, my picture, president, and that's it. That was a sounding board they wanted. And they went ahead and, of course, started campaigning on this. And I said, look, here, stop. For a start, I am not a politician. I'm not going to bring any money to that space. If you want to run with my credibility, be my guest. And if you win, I'll become president. Fine. So they went ahead with it. And lo and behold, people knew at that time that they were going to get that Muslim woman president. And they still voted. They voted, they won with a landslide. There were three small parties proposing my name. And in front of us, there were these two big, it was David Goliath match. So went ahead. And one day I was sitting in my desk, of course, watching the election result. I closed my computer that night and I said to myself, I shall be president. And I did.
Wow.
That was what,
that was my story.
2015? Was that 15? I think
15, yes, 14,
2015.
December 2014. And you
Okay.
know, since I went in, one thing I never stopped doing the advocacy for science, bringing in girls in science, promoting education, all that I had benefited, which actually shaped my journey to the space I became in. Then the other thing I also was very mindful, because I spoke at the COP21, of course, the very first Paris meeting, which was successful for the climate agenda, is I did also a lot of advocacy on climate change, the changing climate, and what we need to do. And also, when I joined the Diplomatic Academy, I said to myself, and I said to the people, look, we are a cohort of over 30 countries. We have a strong voice at the UN, because with so many of the small island states, we have a voice, and I think we should do something about it. And I thought to myself that one way of addressing this agenda for the changing climate, especially for SIDS, because that resonates with us, is we need to start sharing experiences. We need to start sharing experiences, what worked for us. For example, what works for Mauritius could also be applicable to Cape Verde, for example. Cabo Verde, it can also be applicable to some in the Seychelles, for example, which is next door to us. So many of the island states around will have issues with the climate. There's no doubt. If you look at Fiji, if you look at Tuvalu, which is some areas are already underwater. So I said that we have to do something about this. So this is the message I've been carrying. I've been also doing a lot of public speaking. Now I'm getting more and more involved with the African Union, because we're trying to promote girls in science. In fact, last week I was at what I call the Stanford of Africa, which is the University Mohammed VI in Morocco, which is doing massively well, huge investment in that space. And so we're trying to promote more girls, more women in the science, promoting this for the 5 regions in Africa, of course, the 6 regional women's the diaspora. So that's what I'm doing. Of course, I do a lot of consulting. So life is good.
Yeah, impressive too. Impressively good. Well, you remind me, and I don't know if you've come across this organization, but one of the organizations that what we do is we build a portfolio of both foreign direct investment corporations, as well as NGOs that are appropriate for education, health, and in this particular instance, women's issues. And we work with an organization called Women's Campaign International. And they go around the world creating hundreds of thousands of jobs for women, from small craft applications to larger, highly organized organizations. But I was just curious if you had ever come across Women's Campaign International in your
No, I have not. Yeah,
they are founded by a former colleague of mine from the U.S. Congress, and she was also a very well-known national reporter in the U.S. press, named Marjorie Margolis, and that's how I hooked up with her, was through our service in the U.S. Congress.
Wonderful. Yeah. So the thing what I was trying to do as well when I was an entrepreneur, the message I have now, because when you look at Africa, whenever you talk about women entrepreneurship, the first thing that comes to mind is women doing embroidery, women selling pickles, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I said to them, no, we need to go beyond this. And I think we need to promote women, because I think one message I also had in office and outside of office is that Africans, especially young women African, can become job creators and not job seekers.
Well,
so we
they
need
can go beyond job creation, because one of the things that we incorporate in our structure is ownership. And actually, everybody in that community, whether it's 5,000 or 10,000 people, they have a piece of the action, if you will. They have ownership in the anchor tenant economic activity, which is typically agriculture, typically greenhouse production, because we want agriculture that saves water, saves electricity, and can withstand the terrible things that the climate throws at them. But we also want the people who work there to have a share. So they have a share, and they get either a salary or they get a dividend. And that puts them into quarterly, if not less frequently semi-annual or annual shareholders meetings, which
Yes.
essentially teaches them how to follow the business. And they get an understanding of that business, and then it's set up. In the United States, they did a wonderful program, which is called the Small Business Administration's 8A program. The
Mhm.
8A program allows for small minority-owned businesses to partner with huge multinationals. And this was all done again in the state of Alaska as
Right.
a testing ground. And these multinationals do not have the majority share of the profits. They have the minority share of ownership. They may have the majority share of the contract amount because, for example, I learned all about this by defending a woman-owned environmental engineering company out of Massachusetts with 22 people who were going toe-to-toe with one of the world's largest engineering firms, Arcadis, out of Holland.
Right.
And they were being badly treated. And we had to essentially teach Arcadis how to be a mentor, not a monster. And so we basically revealed in all of their email communications how much they were looking down their nose at and being chauvinistic about and mistreating this very
Yes.
brilliant woman who had this small company and who was able to negotiate with the U.S. government the largest public contract in the history of the country of $150
Wow.
million. Well, 20 million of that went to the small woman-owned engineering firm. 130 million went to Arcadis, but 55% of the ownership went to, and therefore the profits went to the small company as well. And it was a phenomenal success. And once we kicked the shins of the Arcadis folks enough, they got into line and they understood that there was a reason they were supposed to be teaching and helping this young and small firm to grow and handle this kind of business because they had innovative technology that Arcadis didn't have. So
Mhm.
this is something that I've seen happen. Yes, it worked in the United States. Yes, we have good legal systems, rule of law, all that works and so forth. But my family on my mother's side has been involved in rule of law issues in Africa for 40 years. And, they're making small but steady progress.
Yes.
And this sort of transparency, this sort of openness and responsibility throughout the whole system ultimately is going to be what saves and makes that continent flourish. And by association, your small island out in the Indian Ocean will benefit most immediately.
I totally agree with you. And I think one area which also I overlap with you is focusing on agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And I think over the past 2 years, we have seen some countries that were actually self-sufficient when they had started growing, for example, their own grains like millet, sorghum, as you know. These countries have done amazingly well in terms of food security. But I think beyond this, I'm also very focused on encouraging transformation of their ag produce, because we know that what is produced at the farm and what gets to the market, there's a huge amount of loss in terms of the post-harvest loss.
Yeah.
And we need to harness that. And this is the gap that have to be addressed on the continent. So these are kind of messy, because I have worked quite a bit with many of these organizations when I was in academia. So I brought all these together and tried to address because increasingly the African Development Bank even saying that with 60% of the arable land on the continent, but 85% being rain-fed in the face of a changing climate. So we need to be able to do that. So this is, and of course, in Malawi, I'm also aware of the work because Joyce Banda, the former president, who is a friend of mine, she's very focused on empowering women, especially through agriculture.
Well, and we're working with our partner in Malawi is a Israeli by the name of Nir Guess. And one of the things that he is doing is he is rescuing young women, girls, literally, from the trafficking trade, the sex trade, sending them to a kibbutz in Israel for a 6-month rehabilitation process. and then bringing them back, and they're working. He has 1,000 people employed in his greenhouses in Lilongwe, actually just
Wow.
up by the airport, by the Kamuzu
Yes.
Airport, north of Lilongwe. And so these are the things, it's all an integrated program that, and what I have learned, and you will know better, so I'm very eager to hear your comment about this, but what I have learned is that in order to succeed in Africa, you have to control, or at least have your fingers in everything in the supply chain. Because if one thing takes a hiccup or hits a rock or goes off course, it destroys the whole supply chain, and you ultimately are left with nothing.
Yes.
If you have that kind of control, and that supply chain is feeding a diverse market as opposed to a single market, then you have the opportunity of weathering ups and downs and all of the vagaries that doing business in Africa can throw at you. And as I said earlier in my comments, we've developed a transparent platform, which we call the Prosperity Platform, which allows our customers, our partners, really, because they all have an ownership share, they are allowed the opportunity to see where everything goes. And when everybody sees where everything goes, all of a sudden you don't have the little black corners or the little dark buckets in the back hall where typically people are putting their extra pennies or extra whatever monetary unit you're using, and all of a sudden everyone has to kind of step forward and come clean.
Yes.
And it is a very difficult thing to get people to understand and accept, but slowly we are seeing that acceptance. And this is a life work. This isn't this is a 15-year investment. This is not a 3-year return and abscond with the profits kind of operation. And so at the end of the day, that's what we do, is we have built into these contracts formula based on market conditions that allow the locals to buy out the foreign, if you will, the foreign investors, the foreign developers, so that they own the communities and the businesses within those communities 100% themselves. And this is to counteract what the Chinese are doing, to counteract what has been done throughout the centuries by the Europeans. This is to give that kind of indigenous, that kind of native talent the opportunity both to learn, to operate, and to ultimately own the entire program all by themselves. And so we are looking for places where we can do feasibility studies for communities of 5,000 to 10,000, where greenhouse agriculture is at the core, but housing is important, solar power production is important, and all the other ancillary businesses that help to make that community sustainable, which turn it into, from a single source economy to more like a mutual fund. Everybody is doing a little bit of everything, and that all is contributing to the stabilizing and the sustainability of that community.
That's wonderful. I mean, yes, you're right. In terms of the supply chain in Africa, if you touch on, and immediately as you're speaking, I was thinking, have you done any business at all in Rwanda?
I have been to Rwanda, and I'll tell you, there's an interesting story behind my relationship with Rwanda. The other half of the Swett family is populated by a much more talented and much better looking person, my wife. And she's a lot smarter, and she happens to be the daughter of a former congressman who's no longer alive, named Tom Lantos, who was the only Holocaust survivor to ever be elected to the US Congress. Tom's focus in life was human rights, and he was world renowned in that area of human rights. And when he passed away back in the late aughts in 2008, my wife established a foundation in his name called the Lantos Foundation for Human Rights and Justice. And she has traversed the globe looking to call out those that are doing bad things to people and to honor those who are protecting people from being abused on the human rights level. And one of the people that we honored, I serve on the board of the foundation, but she's really the person who runs the program. And one of the people that we recognized and honored was Paul Rusesabagina from Rwanda for his Hotel Rwanda efforts during the genocide. And 3 years ago, Kagame kidnapped him and threw him into prison because that's what he does to people who he's threatened by. And I was in Rwanda 2 years ago, knowing that Paul was there, and I had to tread lightly because I didn't want to join Paul in free housing. But what I did want to do is to let people know that we were not happy with this. And I will tell you, of all the places I flew around into in Africa, Rwanda was the cleanest and the best functioning. And I met with the board of development directors, and I met with the high government officials. And Kagame, for all his bad aspects, has a very good vision for how to clean up and to make well an economy that had suffered terribly as Rwanda had. Now, it also helps that he was given billions of dollars to work with, but he didn't squander the money. He put it to good use, and he made himself a good example. He went out and he picked up the garbage on the street along with everybody else in the country. I was in Sudan just last summer, and I met with Hemeti, I met with Buhran, and to both of them, I said, if you went out on Saturday morning and you picked up, the garbage in front of your palace for, a couple of hours every Saturday, and you encouraged everybody to do that in front of their houses, you would change the attitude of the people of your country. Because I saw it in the United States with Lady Bird Johnson and the Beautify America. I was a 10-year-old kid, but I was all for it. I was out picking up garbage and doing, and it changed my life and it changed my world. And, these are the things they refused to do. They said, oh, we don't, that's below us, essentially was what they were saying. But to get back to your question about Rwanda, it is one of the countries that has the potential of being the star of the African continent.
But there is another country. Yeah, there is another country I visited, and you mentioned South Sudan. Yes. They also have the ambition, and I know the vice president there, and she wants to drive this sector completely.
And I know the president well. I've met with him twice in the last 2 years. Yeah, and their problem is that they are so far behind. Their infrastructure is so bad that it's going to take significant investment to bring the infrastructure up to the place where they can then start doing commerce but their heart and spirit are in the right place. Absolutely. And they're trying to do and we are trying to help them to the extent that we can.
Yes. I mean, I think this is another country where we can make a huge impact with very small amount. And also it's really empower the women, because agriculture is core to
and the women on the entire continent are going to make the biggest difference. No doubt about that.
Yes.
So I would love to introduce you to Marjorie Margolis of the Women's Campaign International. I would love to continue this conversation and help Mauritius if there's any way possible, but I don't know where to begin. I think you have that probably better defined than anybody in your entire country. So I'm all ears.
Yeah, there is a small island you have come to Mauritius called Rodriguez, and this is where agriculture can really make a big impact, because here in Mauritius we have moved away from agriculture, because after independence from the British in 1968, our economy was 92% agriculture, monocrop economy, sugar was king. And right now, as we speak, it introduces less than 4 points to our economy.
Well, in greenhouses, you could feed your whole country.
Exactly. With greenhouses, we can do that. So this is something we can do. But I think if we go to Rodriguez, it's also Mauritius. The infrastructure is almost there. And this is where we can really establish the connectivity is also good, not just to Mauritius, of course, to Réunion, to the region. And this is also a place where we can help the women, because again, the women, they are the driving force behind everything. So Mauritius, Rodriguez will be one. South Sudan, if you want to go there. South Africa, there's plenty of women in, of course, in poverty, in of course, they're very poor. There, again, we can make a difference. The infrastructure is there. Ethiopia would be another one. And so there are many pockets like these, right? Nigeria, of course, you've been there recently. I know many people in Nigeria as well. Yes. And I know that President Obasanjo was also trying to drive something at his level, you know, into these areas. So these are things that we can do, and transformation as well. This is something that I'm very keen on, transforming, adding value, so that at least we can cater, if anything else, to the local market, which is now the African market with 1.4 billion people, and already help, you know, sustain livelihoods, and eventually, you know, make these women entrepreneurs, and as you have rightly said, become owners of their own entities. So definitely, I mean, this is very much, and I did exactly the same thing when I was an entrepreneur. I was holding the equity, and of course the shareholding within my own little company I did set up. So I am fully, you know, you speak my language, so we speak each other.
I would love to not only speak your language, but to do your dance, if you will.
We can dance together.
Is that like an American saying? Because I've not heard it before. I'm all about that.
But honestly, I think if there is a way, I would love to share with you, you know, one of the draft proposals that we are working on. You can see the video on our website about what we're doing in Malawi. But I think having the women's aspect of this front and center is absolutely critical. And I think that that's something that you could be very, very helpful with. And obviously, as I've said, we're working with an organization that has the same commitment in Marjorie's Women's Campaign International. So I think, you know, I'd love to, with your willingness, to share some of this information, but that could enable us to maybe possibly find a site where this can be tested out. It can be a beta test for this integrated community where this kind of ownership, this kind of production, this kind of opportunity is developed, and it is developed under the guidance of and leadership of the women of the community.
Sure. Yep. You can do it on a small scale, as I said, in Mauritius, and a larger scale across somewhere on the continent.
Yes.
You can do it at 2 levels.
And as I say, we're already, once we get started in one of these, we will be more than happy to include you in the feasibility study stages. That will be a 6-month period where, you know, we will all gather around a table. We'll put the information on the table and then integrate it right there into our prosperity platform. And I think that's what we want to do in the coming few years. And hopefully within 4 or 5 years, we will have, you know, and we'll have a test site in Malawi. We'll have one in Nigeria. We'll have one in Mauritius. We'll have one, you know, these things will dot the countryside. And the whole objective is that, and I don't know if you've ever read this book, but I have a dear friend who passed away in 2019. His last book that he wrote as professor at the Harvard Business School, a fellow by the name of Clayton Christensen. He wrote a book called The Prosperity Paradox, how innovation can eliminate poverty among the nations. And the idea, and he uses this example, so I'm just taking it right from the book. The idea is that he has studied the notion of consumption and non-consumers. In order to get non-consumers into a consuming position, which is the only way you're going to create new markets and the only way that you're going to alleviate poverty, is that you build new markets where the non-consumer exists. And building a new market where the non-consumer exists means that what that non-consumer makes is for themselves, not for the rich, not for some other marketplace where someone puts a big markup on it and makes a huge killing, and none of it gets back to the poor people who are struggling to put the pieces together. So what he uses as his example is Henry Ford's Model A assembly line, because he says the first people that got that job were coming out of the slums of Detroit. They were assembling these cars for a fraction of the cost of what automobiles cost at that time. And they were the people who bought the first cars off the assembly line, which enabled them to move out of the city, out of the slums, into what were not called suburbs at that time. It was called the countryside, and create the suburban landscape that was what the middle class of America was built on. And that's what we believe is going to be the solution for Africa, the solution for the poorer portions of Asia, the solutions for any of the poverty communities, even the Delta region in the United States, the inner city, the Indian reservations. I mean, these are the places where these non-consumers have got to be able to be put to work, have ownership in what they're doing, and benefit themselves first before they benefit the broader population of that country in which they find themselves. And that is what I think is a great template, a great blueprint, if you will, of how we should and how we are modeling these communities. And I highly recommend you pick up a copy of the book and take a look at it, because it really is the best description of what my partner and I have been doing for the last 12 years. And imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. I'm happy. The more of us who can talk the language, the better.
I love the passion that's coming not only from you, Ameenah, but also from Ambassador Swett. So this is fantastic. And honestly, what I love about it, it's the sustainability aspect of it. That is where you get to that sustainability. And that has been a longstanding problem for a lot of these areas that are getting aid dollars in. It's just, the project management piece of it is not really in place like it should be. But
well, Ameenah, you mentioned earlier in your remarks, or at least you alluded to, maybe I'm expanding on much more than what you intended, but the foreign direct investment by U.S. corporations globally last year was $6.3 trillion. That's private money. That's not governments. That's not taxpayers. That's just private money. $6.3 trillion went out of U.S. corporations into their facilities or expansion of their operations in other countries all over the globe. Less than 0.5% went to Africa.
Wow. Okay.
That
less
tells
than
you
1/2. Wow.
Less than 0.5%. Shame on us, but more importantly, shame on Africa. Why can't Africa attract that kind of investment? Well, you and I know why, but that's got to change. Similarly, $4 trillion over the last 50 years were invested in Africa, and what do we have to show for it? I'm not sure. I mean, yes, poverty has diminished, but it's not, it's still a divided economy.
Yeah. No, definitely we need to empower. I think at least start with hunger. Feed the people, create the enterprise around the women. And I think we can ensure sustainability there, because once the women get on board and they start making a difference, it's going to snowball from there. So we should be able to do that. And I'm thinking, when I'm speaking to you, I'm thinking, I've just met a lady last week in Morocco, and she's also very keen on starting something that really will help women. And she has a structure which we, of course, eventually we can get her on board because she already has the network. So we can do that. And so definitely I am on board. I'd like to get more. But please, Mary, can you send me the copy of the book? I would like to have a look at it. And
we will definitely work on getting that to you. And we'll do that as a follow-up to this conversation. So as I get you kind of loop things together, and I know if you guys will stay on for just a couple minutes, because I know that it seems like you guys want to have another conversation, set up another conversation, that's fine. But I want to say goodbye to everybody else. It seems evident. I usually ask, who do you need to meet? But it seems evident who you need to meet to move your work forward at this point. So I don't know that I need to even ask that. But you know, I think we all are here to help each other, and I think that's what our goal is, and to, you know, to do whatever we can to make things better in the world, but particularly in Africa right now, since our focus is there. So thank you, Ambassador Swett, always a wonderful co-host. You always have such good information and questions. And our special guest, Ambassador Ameenah Gurib-Fakim. Yes, thank you so much for being with us. It's an absolute pleasure to meet you and to spend some time getting to know you a little bit better. So thank you. And thank you everyone who's watching this maybe on our YouTube channel. If you'll go to Frontrunners Innovate.com, then you'll get this interview and some more information about these two. And you know, you can find us on anywhere you find a podcast. We're everywhere. Spotify, you know, Apple, we're everywhere now. So thank you everybody, and until next time, happy front running. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.